People choose Morton Buildings to build a variety of buildings for their property any time of year because they know Morton Buildings are built stronger, last longer, and look better. So if you need a garage, a stall barn, or a storage building for an RV, boat, or other vehicles, a shop for your farm, hobbies, or car restoration projects, or anything in between, act now and contact Morton Buildings at mortonbuildings.com. Don't delay. Construction schedules are filling up fast. That's mortonbuildings.com.
Hunting season is upon us, and it's time to get geared up for the blind. Winchester, the official ammunition of Ducks Unlimited. Winchester has what you need to be successful this season with a great lineup of shot shell products, including Expert, Dry Lock, Final Pass, and Last Call Double Shot. Check out the brand new Final Pass, a premium steel blend load that utilizes 2 shot sizes for the perfect balance of pattern density and energy. Or try Last Call Double Shot with a devastating payload of tungsten and steel. Visit Winchester.com to learn more and get ready for your next outdoor adventure.
The following episode of the DU podcast features a video component. For the full experience, visit the Ducks Unlimited channel on YouTube. Subscribe and enjoy.
Can we do a mic check, please?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brasher.
I'm your host, Katie Burke.
I'm your host, Dr. Jerad Henson. And I'm your host, Matt Harrison.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly.
Hey everyone, welcome to Waterfowl Weather Live from the Ducks Unlimited studio here at One Waterfowl Way in Memphis, Tennessee. I am Dr. Mike Brasher. I'm happy to be joined by Dr. Jerad Henson. It's great to have you on one of these episodes here.
Mike, happy to be here.
We did a few of these last year where we check in with some experts in the meteorological field to kind of give you an update on how things may have unfolded over the past little while, and then more importantly, to look ahead at what may be coming and how that might affect us as duck hunters in the field. And to kind of amplify the value of the information that we get from our guests, we have a duck hunter meteorologist with us. They're joining us again. I got 2 guys from sort of the Mid-South. First, we've got Skot Covert, who is the chief meteorologist with 5 News, Fayetteville, Fort Smith, Arkansas. Skot, great to have you joining us again. Also joining from Missouri, Chance Gotsch. He's returning to help us out again this year. He is a meteorologist with First Alert 4 KMOV out of St. Louis, a new destination for Chance this year. But Chance, thank you for coming back and joining us here on this little event. But here we're going to talk about weather, ducks, and kind of look out a little bit and see what we can get excited about. Jerad, I know you've been doing your own sort of research on various web platforms, and you're getting excited about, or hoping to get excited about what may be to come.
Hoping. You look out there in that 14-day window, and things kind of get a little exciting. So, I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but so I'd love to hear what the experts have to say. And we also did just get a really nice weather event that came through kind of at least our area, and it brought us some rain that was really needed.
Badly needed. So badly needed. Had about 5 consecutive days of rain. It was some heavy, but some kind of light and consistent, and that was good. So, but enough about our unprofessional chit-chat about what's happening with the weather. I think we're going to go to Chance first, and we wanted to talk about sort of these prevailing conditions that we've been experiencing really across, I think, much of North America for the first 2 months of the hunting season. So Chance, kind of tell us what we've been dealing with. A lot of folks will want to know what has been causing that. But so Chance, do you have any graphics associated with drought or anything of that nature? We were going to bring some of those. I think we got.
Yeah, let me go ahead and fire this up here for you guys. But yeah, just threw this together. So really want to focus on what you're seeing here. This is going to be looks back off from this past spring. So, a lot of times we're thinking of breeding waterfowl during that time of the year. And the main thing I want you to pay attention to in a sec here, we're going to go into the latest update, which just came out yesterday morning at 9:30. So it's pretty much hot off the press here. But the whole western half of the United States has just been extremely dry this past spring. A lot of relief that we saw across much of the Midwest, all the way back off to the east towards the Atlantic. So that was really good news for us. And I know they're experiencing a lot of issues the last several years up towards the Dakotas and that area there. But when we look at the latest update, there's a couple things that really stick out. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of scroll down here, and we're going to go through this. I mean, you look at that massive chunk that was basically over Colorado and the Dakotas, and we were in D3, which is just extreme drought across a lot of that area, and it's carved out a lot the last several months, which is really good. But you look back towards kind of our neck of the woods here, a little bit into the northern southern part of the region here, Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky. The last several months have been very dry. We've seen a little bit of this erase, kind of like what you guys were seeing, a couple of long-standing rain events that we've had. And a lot of times when we're looking at drought, you don't want, you could have a 3-inch rainfall within a day, but that's not going to solve drought. The thing that solves drought is smaller amounts over a longer period of time, because a lot of that will just run right off the surface and they really can't seep into the ground. So we've seen a lot of a chunk of that eliminated. Still off to the west, you're still seeing a lot of drought. So that's something that's going to be definitely something that's going to be a little bit harder to face when you start to look back towards the Pacific Flyway and the western portions of the central. But Canada is looking really dry too. That's something where I know it doesn't matter most likely as much this time of the year, but that's definitely something that we're continuing to watch. But there is a little bit of good news as we head further out here. And I'm sure me and Scott will be touching on that here in a second for those hunters across much of Canada and even the Northwest. The South, things might be looking a little bit more bleak for you in terms of this with the rain.
Yeah. Chance, I'll jump in here a little bit and tell you that just a couple of weeks ago, I was up in Prairie, Canada, and looking at this North American Drought Monitor map that you've got up there, you will see that a good chunk of the Prairie Pothole region is out of kind of meteorological or hydrological drought. That does not mean that all of those wetland basins are full of water. It had been probably 7 or 8 years since I had been up to that landscape. This time of year, I'd been up there in the spring periodically and seen some improving conditions. But this time of year, as a comparison to what I'm familiar with, 7 or 8 years since I'd been there, I drove across a landscape where I was familiar with one of that Allen Hills region southeast of Saskatoon, and I spent an entire summer there back in the late 90s doing some research. And the lack of water that area is facing right now is just astounding. There are so many empty wetland basins, and it's been that way for years here over the past little stretch of time. Talked to some folks, and they said, yeah, as bad as you saw it, it's actually improved from where it was like 2 or 3 years ago. And so I know I've talked a lot about drought on podcasts and everything else that I do, but to be able to see it that time of year with a point of reference, late summer, early fall, was just eye-opening for me. And it's no wonder that particular area isn't producing ducks. It just doesn't have the habitat right now. Right. It's astounding. So to your point, although this map may show it's out of drought, that doesn't mean those wetland basins are full. Yeah. It's working on saturating that soil so that it can run off into those basins once we get additional rainfall or snow.
Yeah, I feel like you said, 3 or 4 years ago, and that 2 or 3 year stretch really set us back for a lot of wetlands. And we see that here even in Missouri still, where it's gotten better, but it's still nowhere near where we need to be for that long-term average for a lot of the wetland areas.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to just jump in, just looking at these, and especially since we kind of have that Mid-South focus here, but we set up with a really wet spring through this Mid-South. Had, from what I understand, a year's worth of precip by April.
Yeah.
And then it got real dry.
The faucet turned off. It seems like it does that. It seems like it's just wet, and then boom, shuts off.
So I think there were some expectations early, but then it got real dry. So I was interested kind of to hear what Chance and Scott had to say kind of some about that.
Yeah. Well, and at this time of the year too, we look at the fall months into early winter. Just on average, these are the driest months we typically see. So the rainfall we've been getting is very beneficial. I think I was looking at a statistic. We had close to 2 inches of a deficit of rainfall alone in August. September was over 2 inches. And at the start of October, I mean, we were at like almost 5 inches below where we should have been. So really, it's kind of uncharacteristic to be seeing the rainfall that we've been getting recently to kind of get us back out of there. I mean, I think in Missouri alone, we're back to where we should be. But like you guys said, that's just getting the ground saturated. So that's not even going to be a lot of runoff. I mean, a lot of that gets soaked up in this. And definitely eye-opening to see that. But this is a typical time of the year where we do see that turn off. But at least we saw some help this past spring.
Yeah. So Scott, Chance, what else do you have for us there?
So I was going to let Scott here in a bit. I'll kind of go into a little bit more of the long-range forecast. But Scott, I think, is going to cover a little bit more in depth on our expected ENSO cycle and what that means and kind of historic data on that.
Okay, that sounds good. You know, the other thing that we have been experiencing here the first couple of months has been above average temperatures. That was one of the themes that I've heard from a lot of people when it was up in Saskatchewan. What was it? 2 weeks ago, or was it last week? Yeah, it was last week, and had 60-degree temperatures. It was pleasant. It was great.
I have pink tomatoes ripening on the vine in my backyard.
That's right. One of them was telling me that their tomatoes are still. And I think it was Frank Baldwin out of Winnipeg. Yep. So it has been above average normal temperatures throughout, all the way up, and I think pretty much across the board. The other thing that has happened recently is had a couple of weather systems move in. Chance, you mentioned one of those that had affected us here in the Mid-South, but the folks in the Northeast certainly welcomed that as well because they had been also enduring extreme drought. So I know they were happy to receive all that rain as well. If you're a duck hunter, it means you're going to get more water for your for duck habitat and more places to hunt as well. So we're happy about that. So with that, Scott, I think we're going to jump over to you now, and we'll talk about sort of more winter forecasts, predictions, prognostications based on some of these larger climatological cycles. So take us through that.
Yeah, so I think it's first really beneficial to start the conversation with the difference between a deterministic forecast and a probabilistic. So deterministic is going to be just the same thing you see on a 10-day forecast on the 10 o'clock news. It's going to be what you see on your phone apps. It's going to be specific numbers, whether that's temperatures or rain chances. And we're really not going to be able to talk those numbers today. At this range, we can only look at probabilistic information that gives us an idea. We're going to be reading the tea leaves in layman's terms. That's about the best we can get when it comes to these long-range forecasts. So just keep that in mind as we kind of dive into some of this data. You know, we're having a very similar conversation that we did last year. Last year, we were pretty dry area-wide, certainly down in the Mid-South, the Mississippi Flyway, other areas pretty dry out there as well. And also last year, I'm recalling we were talking about La Niña. There was a likelihood that La Niña would emerge, and there would be some benefits. There would be some negatives to La Niña, kind of depending on where you're at across the continent. And we're having the same conversation again this year. I would say the difference, though, last year we were anticipating La Niña. A lot of the weather models suggested a weak La Niña would emerge. And it really didn't until late in the season. Oh, I think it might have been the week season went out. So like late January. Difference this year is La Niña's emerged. It's here, and it's weak, but it's here, and it's expected to be a short duration La Niña, meaning it probably runs through December, January, February before dissipating at that point. So with the table set, we got La Niña. What is it? Just kind of as a refresher, we're talking about some trade winds pushing back off towards the west on the equatorial Pacific Ocean. Why in the heck does that matter to duck hunters across North America? Well, all of weather is dictated by ocean circulations. Those ocean circulations are going to be dictated by how cool or how warm the temperatures of the ocean are, and that really displaces or moves the jet stream. The jet stream is the moneymaker, right? It's the one that brings these weather systems through the area. And when that jet stream, or I'll often think of it as kind of like a railroad track for storm systems, when that gets moved, well, weather patterns, of course, are going to get moved there as well. Typical La Niña, and a big giant asterisk on the word typical. A typical La Nina kind of looks like this. Pacific Northwest gets pretty wet. Some of those wet conditions do extend into parts of Canada as well. Upper Midwest, generally speaking, is probably going to be pretty cold. You get into the deep south and you're looking at drier than normal patterns, oftentimes warm as well. And there is a part of the Great Lakes that can see some above average precipitation. Now, to be clear, you look at this map and you're thinking, okay, I'm in purple, I'm in dry. That's not necessarily going to mean you don't get any rain at all, right? Again, this is probabilistic. All this means is at the end of the season, when you tally it up and you run the average, you're going to be probably looking at less rain than you typically pick up. Or when it comes to temperatures, if you're in a warm zone in a typical La Nina, it means the odds are stacked in a direction that would lead to some above average temperatures. I think the key takeaway, though, is there's no such thing as a typical La Nina. They're all different in their own right. Some of them are stronger, some of them are weaker. This one's weaker from what we can tell right now in some of the model data. So you can take a look at the seasonal forecast that NOAA puts out. They released this on October 16th, so just a couple of weeks ago. They are going to update it once a month. So we do anticipate it'll be probably about the middle of November. It's always on a Thursday. They'll update this, but this is kind of what they put out with regards to temperatures for December, January, February. It kind of resembles a typical La Nina in some fashion when it comes to temperatures. When it comes to precipitation, it also has a pretty good semblance of a typical La Nina. Now, let me just go abundantly clear here. The experts at NOAA, the Climate Prediction Center, are the best of the best. They're really, 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 really good. And I'm not going to criticize their work. They have a lot more degrees hanging on the wall than I could ever even imagine.
I had a lot of thoughts running through my head there. I really appreciated the graphic that we were about to get to. That was pretty cool because it does get to this issue of typical and average. And you can't, one year, even if you've got the same kind of strength of a La Nina or an El Nino, doesn't mean that you're going to experience the same conditions that you did in a previous year, regardless of where you are. The one good thing that I was a little bit excited about was there were some predictions of a tendency for, well, I shouldn't say predictions, there was a tendency for there to be a bit more moisture up there in those northern latitudes around the breeding areas, the prairies, and so forth during these kind of years.
We need that fall moisture going into a freeze.
We need fall moisture, we need spring moisture, and then we need it to continue into the summer. Yeah, that's what we need, and so hopefully he's going to be able to deliver that for us whenever he comes back. Chance, do we still have you?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you. Yep. You got anything to offer here? I'm sure you do.
Yeah. I'll kind of let Skot come back once he gets his audio right on exactly the point he was getting to. But I can honestly, if you guys are cool with it, go to a little bit more now future forecast. If you guys are all right with that, we can go into the 8 to 14 day away.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and 8 to 14 day, and then we'll come back when we get Skot's audio fixed.
Okay. Yeah. So here's kind of what we're looking at right now. There's two different things. We always typically, when we look at temperature and we look at precipitation, and Skot kind of alluded to this earlier, there's three means that we typically look at it. We look at above, near, and below average. That's kind of the general consensus when we go so far out with these things. You guys mentioned it's been a little bit on the warmer side, and a lot of our trends right now, even here in Missouri, typically our average afternoon highs around 63, 62 degrees. That'll continue to fall to the upper 50s into late next week. We're going to be looking at Wednesday of next week close to 70 degrees. And most of the country is going to be kind of all in this realm. So that's not saying we can't have one or two little cold systems, but as an average for that extended period of time, 8 to 14 days away, most of the country, I know Missouri actually opens up a lot of their season tomorrow, is going to be looking at a warmer kickoff here, especially if that's when you're starting out now. So it's going to be a pattern here that's going to hold above average for those temperatures. On top of that, we're going to be looking a little bit drier across much of the mid-continent area. Good news is to the northwest, and you're going to hear this reoccurring theme here in the future when we look again at the extended outlooks for winter. The northwest, the northeast, and the southeast are going to be looking wetter than average. And that's a lot of times has to do with these high pressure systems. So there's two different things we look at whenever we look at these maps. So you can kind of see here, and you saw when we were looking at Skot's map just earlier, we're looking at pressure systems a lot of times to give us these forecasts on, hey, is it going to be drier or is it going to be wetter? And when we're looking at it, that polar jet stream that you saw there, a lot of times whenever it's going to be basic weather, not much change, a lot of times that can be associated with near or drier than average conditions. We see those jet streams, what we call zonal flow. So it basically goes straight from east to west, right? So there's not much of a wave in it. But when we start seeing the jet streams become wavy and bandy, that's when we start to see a more active system. So we have a high pressure system across much of the Midwest and the Central Plains and even the deep South, South Central area there, where we're going to see high pressure. It's not going to move too much within the next 2 weeks here. And that's going to lead to most likely seeing those below average trends. So not as much rainfall, particularly most likely not snow. With that being said, I know a lot of Midwest this weekend is going to be looking cool. So that's a good thing for any Missouri hunters and any areas nearby here in the Mississippi Flyway and even the eastern central portions of the region. So that's the good news there. But the warmer temperatures, kind of like Scott was mentioning, I'm going to go ahead and shift kind of into those maps that he's shown here. It's a little squishy here. Let's see. So this was the 3-month average. So Scott was showing you December, January, and February. That's our typical winter season. Here's what we're looking at from November, December to January. So we're kind of easing into what could seem like more of a La Niña condition. So what that means is a lot of the South, you kind of split the United States in half and you focus that South, most likely going to see warmer than average temperatures. Now, that's an average. So that doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to be looking at, we could have a couple cold events that still spur in there, but overall, you're most likely going to be hunting warmer temperatures than what we typically see this time of the year. The good news is if you're up north right now, where a lot of the migration still is, it's going to be near where it should be. And then we start to follow that pattern a little bit deeper into the actual extent of the forecast. And you kind of start to see the cooler temperatures creep south with the extended outlook. And what Scott was also showing with La Niña, this is the forecast from NOAA and the National Weather Service. This is very much a traditional average La Niña system setup. And there is some support to that with what we call the QBO, which is quasi-biennial oscillation, basically. And what that shows is it's basically two patterns. And this one is pretty on top of it in terms of these two patterns, where we have 14 months usually where we're going to be seeing easterly trade winds and then 14 months of westerly trade winds. And what that means basically and how that affects you is whenever we start to see the easterly and on typical years of La Niña, that gives us more than likely this pattern, gives us better chances of this. And a lot of times what that could mean too is that polar jet stream that Scott was alluding to and showing, it becomes a little bit more wavy. And what that means is you combine the cooler air with wetter air for much of the Mississippi Flyway off to the north, and you can see it here come into play. That typically means that you're going to get wetter and cooler conditions, which oftentimes when you have cold air and wetter conditions, you have a little bit more snow. So things are looking, I would say, a little bit later on into the season, December, January, February, things are looking a lot better in terms of active weather patterns across much of the northern United States. Off to the south, this doesn't mean you have bad hunting. All right, let's make that clear. You got to think it's cooler up north. Yes, it's warmer down here, but when it's cooler up north, ducks got to go south. So that's definitely going to be something good. And I foresee this being a year where, because of the QBO and the La Niña, that interaction, where we're going to have some pretty impressive events in terms of like some pretty good cold snaps. And we're going to go back and forth a lot, which a lot of times it gets the ducks moving. So that's a good thing.
Stay tuned to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan and Bird Dog Whiskey, after these messages.
So one of the questions that I want to ask here, sort of in response to Chance, what he was showing and talking about, Scott, it also relates to obviously what you're talking about, these larger cycles or climatological patterns. We'll hear a lot about polar vortex disruptions, that super cold air that's sort of circulating at the pole. So also kind of as we're going through this, talk about what we know on the relative likelihood of more frequent or less frequent? The instances of those types of developments occurring.
I think that's a really good question, and it ties perfectly into the same conversation we had last year. You look at these typical La Niña patterns, and you would think, oh my goodness, we're not going to get a single cold front, or it's not going to rain, it's going to be dry the whole thing. No, not necessarily. That was the broad picture we painted last year, knowing still we would probably see a polar vortex spinoff a time or two, and that happened. I mean, I lost a couple of days at least last season because everything was locked up. It got so cold this far south.
People choose Morton Buildings to build a variety of buildings for their property any time of year because they know Morton Buildings are built stronger, last longer, and look better. So if you need a garage, a stall barn, or a storage building for an RV, boat, or other vehicles, a shop for your farm, hobbies, or car restoration projects, or anything in between, act now and contact Morton Buildings at mortonbuildings.com. Don't delay. Construction schedules are filling up fast. That's mortonbuildings.com.
Hunting season is upon us, and it's time to get geared up for the blind. Winchester, the official ammunition of Ducks Unlimited. Winchester has what you need to be successful this season with a great lineup of shot shell products, including Expert, Drylock, Final Pass, and Last Call Double Shot. Check out the brand new Final Pass, a premium steel blend load that utilizes 2 shot sizes for the perfect balance of pattern density and energy. Or try Last Call Double Shot with a devastating payload of tungsten and steel. Visit winchester.com to learn more and get ready for your next outdoor adventure.
In fact, that happens again. I think just because we're in a weak La Niña and there's a lot of orange and red on the maps, that doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to have some big cold snaps. I think that's a real likelihood for many of us. It's just a matter of how long do they last. And it's still in the end, when you have several above normal days, which still is going to be cold, right? If the normal high is 40 and you hit 43, that still counts as above normal. Not going to make much of a difference more than likely to your hunting success or not. It's just in the end, we look at those averages. I think a polar vortex spinoff is likely at least once. I wouldn't even rule out twice or even 3 times.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that lines up pretty well with even the QBO. A lot of times that's what we see. You see it get really wavy in the atmosphere, and like Scott's saying, that typically means we will see a few of those active events.
Yeah, you look at some of these historical winter forecasts, and I was not going to say anything negative about NOAA because let me tell you, I love them. I love them to death. And right now they're not getting paid, so I'm really not going to knock somebody that's not getting a paycheck, and they're still showing up to work. You look at some of this versus on the left versus what actually happened those winters on the right. There's a bit of a warm bias in these seasonal forecasts, meaning their forecasts are generally a little bit warmer on average than what actually ends up happening. Now, there are certainly some years where they nailed it, and then there are other analog years, such as 2020 through 2021. You can see, wow, that actually didn't happen even remotely close to what was predicted. So you might be looking at this map and thinking, oh my goodness, it's another really bone dry winter, and we're not going to have any cool weather. I wouldn't believe that for a second. I think we're going to have plenty of fronts to come through. So I just wanted to point that out to say these seasonal forecasts are not the gospel, and they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. There were 2 things on there on those maps, though, that got me excited as a duck hunter. Number one, I'm a Mid-South duck hunter, so that puts moisture and some weather up north, right? So that's exciting, but that also means ducks are going to move up and down the flyway. The other thing I saw at some of the later maps y'all were showing on the preset, there seems to be some moisture in Canada throughout the winter, and so
long range forecast.
So long range it is, but there's potential there.
But we would rather see the green than the red.
That's it,
right?
Right, and so I'm a duck hunter, eternal optimist here. So, so seeing that, that's something I want to talk about.
More green. Yeah, I'll show you a little bit more green. I don't know if our producer can pull that up. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So, you can look at these models and you can see what's a normal La Niña and a normal El Nino. I don't really care a lot about that. I want to know what I call them analogs. What are some recent winters that had similar conditions that are weak La Niña. So I pulled that composite together. So this is going to be from several winters that had similar characteristics at this point in the year, 96 to 97, 2001, many years. You can see those dates listed up at the top of the screen. This is just temperature anomalies. How did the La Niña affect temperature compared to average versus normal? And for the northern part of the country, there's a lot of blue up there. It was a little bit colder than normal, and that extended even into the mid-latitudes as well. Now, you do get in the eastern flyway, the deep south, and you're trending a little bit above average by a degree to 2 when it's all said and done. You look at these maps and you're thinking, what are those lines? And those are climate districts. They're not counties. It's climate districts, and most of the average person has no clue what they are. But that's what those weird shapes are. When you look at precipitation in the same lens, well, weak La Niña often leads to around normal or above average to the north. There's a lot of white on there, which would indicate some normal precipitation patterns. Meanwhile, you get into the deep south, a good chunk of Texas, Oklahoma, the East Coast. Yeah, there's some climate districts that generally suffer a little bit less precipitation. Not always, right? But this is using all of the analogs dating back to the 90s of years that might give us some clues as to what we might be embarking on going into the next little bit. You like blue. I heard you like blue, so I got a little bit more blue for you where it matters the most. So this is taking the European model. It's one of the major global models that Chance and I rely on a lot. It's just one model. It's one of many that are going to have a little bit different idea of kind of how things shake out. This is historically what we see in terms of snowfall as we're transitioning into a weak La Niña winter. Just snowfall, right? So you look up in the Dakotas, and of course we don't see Canada on the screen, but I think you can extrapolate out that certainly in the southern portion of the prairies, at least, you're probably looking at above average snow conditions when it's all said and done. Now you get into the deep south and we don't get a lot of snow to begin with, but those odds are probably going to be a little bit lower where those brown numbers are at.
No, that was pretty cool. And so I found myself sort of looking at that first map, the composite sort of temperature anomaly, and look cold up that right there, cold up in the northern tier states and Pacific Northwest, and then it's above average down here in the southeastern, all across the Atlantic flyway. And I found myself thinking, okay, how will that affect me as a duck hunter if I'm hunting the mid-south, South Atlantic, and even into Texas? I mean, it may be a good thing in terms of getting some movement of birds out of the prairies, out in those northern latitudes, but then it might mean that when we get down here, if we don't have a lot of, if overall our temperatures are above average, that means we're going to have ducks that aren't going to have a whole lot of reason to move, find a lot of food, for thermoregulatory demands and that type of stuff. So it leads to this idea of stale ducks kind of more times than not, if that be the case. So that made me wonder, well, what's the precipitation going to do? It might be a situation where you would be looking to hunt on those, not hunting so much based on the temperature changes, but availability of new rainfall, and new habitat. So,
and when you get stale ducks, that's one of the things we talk about a lot. The only way to make a stale duck, a smart duck move, is change the landscape.
Yeah,
you have to change the game. They find that safe pattern, they stay on it.
Yep.
Until water on the landscape changes, whether it's just shows up new or it freezes solid.
Yeah,
hard water helps too, but doesn't look like that's going to be the case much down there.
You just described my season last year perfectly.
Chance, anything to add to that wonderful set of graphics and sort of descriptions we were thinking about there?
Yeah, no, Scott. I think Scott nailed it right on the head. It's a lot of good stuff. I feel like this season compared to the last several seasons that we've seen outlook-wise, I feel like it's a good thing that we're seeing at least across much of the area. I mean, we'd love to see more rain across the south. But you look across much of the north and those breeding grounds, and we're always thinking about, hey, let's get to next breeding season. So getting that area from Canada, the Prairie Pothole region, reloaded on rain and snow earlier can only help us in that long-term extent. So I think this is a good thing for much of the waterfowl or water that we're going to be seeing across the north, which is going to be beneficial. And a lot of times you think about it, a lot of the river basins are going to be flowing from north to south. So yes, it's going to be drier to the south, but the Mississippi, when you get off towards Boot Hill, Missouri, and down towards Louisiana and all that, that's a very important thing to have filled up. And so the fact that we're going to be seeing better chances of rain to the north, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And I think it's a good thing. And like you guys said, when we have the cooler temperatures to the north, ducks got to push eventually down south.
Yeah. I might emphasize too, for those that are in those areas that are predicted to be slightly drier and slightly warmer, getting water when you can get it is going to be important.
Yeah.
And finding those permanent water sources, those are ducks are going to key in on.
Yeah. So I know we've talked a little bit about sort of longer range forecast. Chance, I think you were covering sort of 8 to 14 day forecast. You might have covered something even in the more immediate future, but I was trying to pay attention to a few other things and might have been a little bit distracted. So for those, like we're here in the South, right? Our duck hunting season is still, and for a lot of states, their hunting season doesn't open until later on this month. So we've still got some time to be optimistic about some magical combination of weather events that's going to really change everything and make just a grand occurrence of ducks show up. Now, the one thing I will say is even when those ducks do show up down here, they're going to be well educated because we don't anticipate there have been a lot of production this year. And then those ducks will have been educated by all the states that get to hunt at them and get to shoot at them before us. So some additional challenges for us down here, regardless of how far you go. But yeah, so anything for those people that are in the middle of their hunting season up in the Midwest. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be hunting up around the Great Lakes next week. I'm kind of anticipating maybe doing more fishing than hunting, but I hope I'm wrong on that. But they got good fishing prospects, even if that's the case. So anything in the very near term that we can get excited about, or, across some of those areas that are currently open?
Short answer is no.
No. Nothing there. That's disappointing.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on where you're at. Look, if you're in the Pacific Flyway and you're in Northern California and points towards the border, you're going to have a decent amount of rain, probably some active weather patterns that are going to pull some fronts through the area. But a good chunk of the country is going to be dominated by some high pressure through at least the middle of November. And at that point, high pressure is going to just suppress a lot of meaningful rain chances. I would say a good chunk of the country is going to see below average rain chances between now and, let's say, November 13th or so.
Yeah. One of the weather apps I use, because that's how you can tell a duck hunter really quick, is how many weather apps are on your phone.
I'm interested to see where you go because I've been looking at some things as well.
Because I looked at one of mine that will predict out 14 days or so, 15 days, and it'll make it to November 14th on that timeline. And both the global model and the European model both predicted a little bit of a front coming through on November 14th.
You heard it from Dr. Jerad Henson.
So, both of them had it in the predictions. I'm not saying anything. I'm not a meteorologist. I'm just looking at one of these apps that's giving me an optimistic viewpoint. But
I look at a few forecasts as well.
Both the models talked about that. So
that's good. And so I have several places that I save in the different apps, and I look at the north of us. One of them is Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and you look at the temperatures over the next 14 days, and it's just a steady drop. There are no forecast major fronts that come through during that time. It's just like the temperatures, the highs and the lows are just following those seasonal declines, but they're still running about 6 to 8 degrees above average for both the lows and the highs, but there's nothing significant in the immediate future that is going to drop those substantially, except maybe something right out there. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to push this episode as late as we could during this week, is because hopefully, we would have seen something develop out 2 weeks off, but we got something to maybe give us some optimism.
Yeah, I haven't seen.
I think things change. I mean, this is going to be an active weather pattern. There's going to be some rapid changes. Yeah, the next 2 weeks probably not looking the best overall, but I know it's anecdotal. But gosh, last year I'd spent all summer working on the family farm, planting millet, taking care of all kinds of stuff. And then it was just bone dry. The second half of the summer into the fall, everything I'd planted dead. I got nothing going for me. And then a week before season starts, we get 10 inches of rain. And then that hole was filled up more so than I was prepared for. So things are going to change. It just may not be early enough to put some early water on the landscape.
Right.
Yeah, I think what we got just recently was probably the best we're going to get for quite a bit of time. Even looking, I think, I was looking out here next Friday, and stuff gets a lot more limited. We do a 10-day forecast here, but when you get out there, a lot can change. I think we have 20% chance here in Missouri for next Friday. That's the next system that we really see across the Midwest, and even then, it's just not a big rain event. So it's looking a little bit more bleak for rain, and in terms of overall trends, it's very similar, very steady. We talk about that high pressure system, which basically paints a perfect picture right here on that precip outlook Skot's got pointed up. And it's basically just going to cover much of the central United States, and not much change happens across much of the area. But if you're off to the northwest and the northeast, where northeast, Atlantic northeast, they've seen a decent amount of rain, even the system that they have currently. So you're probably looking great right now into the early season, going into about mid-season, just by what you have there. But much of the central United States, it's looking a little bit more bleak in terms of rainfall.
Yeah, and I will also.
There's one other wild card.
Go ahead,
Dr. Jerad.
No, I was just going to say quickly. I'll preface that front I was talking about was in Canada and the Dakotas.
That's where it has. That's where it starts.
That's where
they start.
So it wasn't down here. It was up there. It was a cooler system.
Don't crawfish now. Don't backtrack on your.
I didn't backtrack. I get excited when a weather front comes through. It's probably going to push some white geese this way for sure, because it's going to be timely for that.
There's one other wild card that it's really tough to predict this at this range, but we still have a full month, literally a month from today, of hurricane season. No one likes a hurricane making landfall. No one wants the devastation, the destruction. That aside, at times it can bring some meaningful rainfall along the Gulf states, even far inland, and of course on the East Coast as well. At this point, that window's closing, but I wouldn't rule out some tropical moisture, which could be a significant game changer if that were to happen for at least parts of the area.
Yeah. Did you have?
I was just going to say, yeah, I can remember some of those events where, hurricane hit the Gulf Coast in September, October, and it put an awful lot of water, all the way up, even up into the Boot Hill, Missouri.
We don't ever want to necessarily hope for one of those. Certainly, we've seen seeing what the folks down in Jamaica are going through, and that is just devastating situation there. And
worst case scenario,
absolutely horrible to see some of those images coming out of there. Just amazing. I know you guys have been glued to the TV and all of your forecast and all the different applications that you have. Just an absolutely. Just a force of nature. We're kind of getting off track here, but I know that we were all, if you're interested in meteorology or any kind of weather, those was just some unbelievable, an unbelievable storm, unbelievable impact. And our thoughts and hearts go out and prayers go out to all the folks down there. But you guys must have just had some incredible discussions about what was unfolding there.
The science is remarkable and amazing, but it's really tough to appreciate the science and the tools that we have, knowing the impact it's actually having on places like Jamaica. Yeah, you hate to see it, but at the same time, it is kind of awe-inspiring to see the power of Mother Nature.
Yeah. Well, we are going to wrap this up. Jerad, do you have anything else to contribute here right now?
I think that's it right now.
We're good. We're getting excited. We wanted to get something out to folks, let people know we're going to continue to do these, periodically throughout the year. I think they were well received. We had some good engagement and some good comments and feedback, and hopefully we'll have some significant events weather-wise that can influence hunting success across the country that we'll be able to talk about this year. We'll bring those to you as they develop. We've got a couple of other meteorologists that we're trying to connect with. Mandy was with us last year, and I think she's going to try to rejoin us on a subsequent episode of this. I believe she was out hunting or just getting back from hunting. So Mandy, if you are
elk hunting.
So Mandy, if you happen to be watching this, we miss you. Hope you had success on that hunt, and we are going to be connecting with you here in the future. So Chance Gotch, meteorologist with First Alert for KMOV out of St. Louis. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us here again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, and hopefully everybody has a good, safe season. I know that some of the early outlooks are a little bit bleak, but like Skot said, there's a lot that can come, and one event is all it takes to completely change your luck.
That's right. And then Skot Covert, chief meteorologist with 5 News out of Fayetteville, Fort Smith, Arkansas. Scott, thank you as well, and good luck to you as you get out and get hunting in the next several weeks.
Sure do appreciate it.
Okay. And also, thanks to my guest host here, Dr. Jerad Henson. Thanks to our producer, Chris Isaac. Thanks to our assistants over here, Casey Messerly. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. Happy hunting. Happy Halloween. Stay safe out there. And life is short. You better hunt.
Thank you for listening to the DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit ducks.org/DU Podcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.
People choose Morton Buildings to build a variety of buildings for their property any time of year because they know Morton Buildings are built stronger, last longer, and look better. So if you need a garage, a stall barn, or a storage building for an RV, boat, or other vehicles, a shop for your farm, hobbies, or car restoration projects, or anything in between, act now and contact Morton Buildings at mortonbuildings.com. Don't delay. Construction schedules are filling up fast. That's mortonbuildings.com.
Hunting season is upon us, and it's time to get geared up for the blind. Winchester, the official ammunition of Ducks Unlimited. Winchester has what you need to be successful this season with a great lineup of shot shell products, including Expert, Drylock, Final Pass, and Last Call Double Shot. Check out the brand new Final Pass, a premium steel blend load that utilizes 2 shot sizes for the perfect balance of pattern density and energy. Or try Last Call Double Shot with a devastating payload of tungsten and steel. Visit winchester.com to learn more and get ready for your next outdoor adventure.